Happy Sunday everyone, it's a Thursday as I record this. Hopefully by the time you watch it you'll have had a wonderful week full of activities and fun and writing, hopefully. The topic I want to talk to you about today is the stats page on Medium. Actually so much information in there, there's so much data that you can just give your visibility, really understand your audience, what's resonating with them, what they want to hear from you, and understanding how you can improve your writing. In the video, I'm going to cover an overview of the stats page, pointing out what's where and what you should be paying attention to. I want to talk about how you can learn about the frequency of publication, like how often you should be writing stuff. I'll talk about curation, what you can learn from that, title choice, and for me, what the most important stat is for success. I'll also talk about the sources. For each individual story, you can see what drove people to that story. And finally, I'll talk about what you should be avoiding on the stats page. So I'm really excited. Let's get started. There's a lot going on in your stats page, and you can find yours if you go to your Medium profile and click on your little face bubble and click on stats. That's going to take you to your stats overview page. It'll show you the last 30 days, views, reads, fans. You can't do any direct comparisons. You can't compare June to July unless you happen to be on the 30th of that month or the 1st of that month. You can't separate curated versus uncurated. You can't do any filtering of any kind. I think this is intentional. I think Medium is trying to sort of stop us from gaming the system, and I'm okay with that. But you can still do a fair amount of digging. So you can scroll down, see your stories in reverse chronological order, so most recent at the top. You can see the views, the reads, fans, I think read ratio as well on each individual story. And if you click on any of those, you'll be able to rank them highest to lowest, which can be useful, as we'll see later on. I probably have one more column than you if you look at that image, because I've downloaded a Chrome plugin called Medium Enhanced Stats. This shows me the number of claps a story has as well as fans, and it gives me some other useful numbers. Finally, you can see the stats for each individual story if you click on details under that story. This takes you to a page where you can see a graph of performance over time, sources, audience interests too, if you have more than 800 views or so, I believe. So let's talk about how to use those numbers. If you look at my big overview graph, you'll notice that there's a little dot at the bottom of all those columns. That's from the Medium Enhanced Stats page, but you probably don't need it for this kind of analysis. That dot represents how often I've published. The bigger the dot, the more stories on that day. As a result of this, I aim to publish twice per day. So why twice? I've noticed the frequency of publishing stories is the #1 predictor for money that I earn that month, to be totally frank. The more I publish, the more I earn, just generally speaking. So if you look at my chart, you'll notice there's a dot at each one. And if you notice the height of the graph, which represents views, you'll see that on the days that I don't publish, it's lower than on the days that I do publish. And on the days I publish a lot, that day or the day after is higher than, the standard. So I've learned that for me, it's better to publish a lot of pretty good stories rather than focusing on really, really fantastic stories that I publish at a slower rate. Your graph might look different. You might notice that yours is a lot more stable, whether or not you publish, you get similar levels of views, and that's great because that means that your story is more evergreen than mine tend to be. But you might also see that yours is like mine, where on the days you publish, you get a big spike. Even on the days I don't publish, though, I still get a fair number of views, and that's great because that means that my older stories are still having a lot of longevity. They're still driving views, driving fans, and importantly, money my way. And that's great because that means, again, the more I publish, the more I'll have for a rainy day. So either way, for me, looking at that graph, that's how I understand that I need to publish. The more, the better. Now let's look at what we can learn from curation stats. Curation is such a hazy topic, I feel. Nobody really knows, what the rubric is. Medium's given some information out about how to curate, but there's not a huge amount out there. That's okay though, because you can still learn a lot from looking at your own stories. So the first thing you'll notice is that the curated ones tend to have a much longer lifespan than the uncurated ones. The more topics they're curated in, the longer they continue to generate views and the more interesting they are. That's good to know. I found it also helps in letting me know what topics are worth writing in. So I've found that my passions, my cats, writing about psychology, writing about like self-help and productivity, those topics are all pretty well trafficked. They've got a big audience. I recently published one about using R to learn coding, and it was curated in data programming and data science. And I found that it got a ton of views and a fair amount of claps, which I was really, really pleased about. And I noticed that those topics are really well trafficked. So if you get your story curated in those topics, or whichever ones you're finding are getting you a lot of views, those might be stories that you want to consider writing in the future. Next, let's talk about titles. Titles are harder to test because there's no like guaranteed way to A/B test the exact same story, exact same conditions, different titles. But you can get as close as possible by using a republishing tool, although the republishing tool is you. What you'll do is look at your top performing stories, look at like the top 3 or the top 5, and look at their titles. Titles, I really think people don't spend enough time on titles. Titles are what are going to tell your viewers, should I read this story or should I skip it? Is this something I need to see or is it something I can miss? Look at those 5 titles. Do they have an urgency? Are they emotional? Are they analytical? What structure do they have? What words do they use? What's in there? What is making your readers so eager to click and read what's inside of those? Now, go to the opposite end and see which stories have next to no views, but stories that you think are good, stories that you think have a chance. Now, take what you learned from all your titles, the structure, the phrasing, the words, everything, and use it to craft a new title for your old one. Copy paste the old story, paste it into a new story, delete the old one, and title it based on what you've learned. So you can, I don't know what you'll have found, but personally I found that using like really strong, like refuse, adore, words like that, that's what my audience likes. And that's what I try to use in all my titles. You can do the same. Publish it and see what happens. Does it perform better? Does it eventually become one of your top performers over weeks, over months? If that's the case, that's amazing for you to learn now, and that means that you've cracked the code, you know what your audience wants, and that's incredible. Use that information and use it to structure all of your titles in the future. Let's get to what medium statistic matters most. This is going to depend what you want to get out of Medium. Why are you on Medium? Are you doing it to build a portfolio? Are you doing it to build visibility? Are you just in it for the money, like me? People get caught up in views and claps, but if you're like me, the number one stat that you need to be focused on is your fans. Like things like 1,000 views or 1,000 like claps, none of it matters. It's all about the fans when it comes to knowing how much money you're earning. The reason this is that Medium pays out based on engagement. And what I've learned is that engagement means number of individual people who have clapped for a story. So each fan gives me, on average, 50 to 60 cents. Now, in practical terms, what this means is that a story with 3,000 views, that with 10 fans, versus a story with 30 views and 10 fans, they're going to earn about the same amount of money. It's almost nothing to do with fans. Sorry, it's nothing to do with views. It's all about the fans. So when I was just focusing on earning money on Medium, the fans was what I was concerned with. Like, are people enjoying my story enough to clap for it? That's what I wanted. Now that I'm trying to like build my mailing list and I'm interested in getting an audience outside of Medium, I'm also interested in reads. Reads is, I think, my understanding is that the people who get to the bottom of a page in a certain window of time. And that's how I know roughly how many people are seeing my email sign-up call to action and how many of those are converting to sign up to my email list. So that's also interesting for me. But in terms of internal Medium money-making use, fans is the way to go. Now I want to talk about what, in my opinion, is the most underutilized tool of the Medium statistics, and that is sources. Go to your most viewed story right now, and look at the individual stats for it by clicking on details. Go to the sources box, which is going to be at the bottom on the left. Where are your views coming from? This tool, like, it tells you so much. It's telling you how people are getting to your story, but also what people are doing with your story. So for example, if you see that it's being shared on Facebook, if you see that it's being shared on Twitter, that means people are sharing your story on those platforms. you can also see, like, if you try to use a lot of social media and you're posting your link in those areas, this is where you'll see if that's working, if that's drawing people in. You can see, are people finding your story via Google? Medium has such a great Google ranking, so it has, if you just play a little bit with SEO, you can find that your stories get ranked really highly in the Google search algorithm, and this is where you'll see if that's working. You might see that your story is being shared a lot on LinkedIn. That's great. That means that your audience is going to be more business focused, or, you know, there's so much that you can see on the sources page, and I really think that you can get a lot of information out of just looking where people are coming from and what they're doing with your story. Okay, last but not least, I want to talk about what you shouldn't do with your Medium stats. So the main thing to remember is use your stats. Don't let your stats use you. I don't refresh my stats page. I don't click on my notifications. I try not to check it too often even. I like to focus on it in specific sessions, like when I'm digging for data, but I try not to just check it whenever I feel like it, because whenever I feel like it will inevitably become 10 times per hour. I'm so reliant on that little dopamine hit when I see I've got a new fan, or I've got 10 new views or whatever. And for me, it's better to cut that out and focus on it only when I'm interested in focusing on it. Like any other social media tool, it's kind of like a Pandora's box. There's a lot of information in there that you can get at if you dig deeper, but it's also very easy to get caught up in the numbers and just kind of turn it into a numbers game rather than extracting value. So my advice, focus on the value, not the numbers. What are you learning from these numbers? What are they telling you? It's not about how high they are, it's about what you're getting out of them. And as long as you focus on that, you can get a lot of information and a lot of useful takeaways from your Medium stats. So that was my tutorial on how to use the Medium stats page. I hope that you enjoyed it and you got a little bit out of it. If you've got any questions, leave them below in the comment box. I would love to get them and to answer them for you. So, a little bit of news. My piece in Human Parts was published, really exciting for me. So I've uploaded my successful pitch that I emailed them with originally that caused them to accept my story. Maybe. I've uploaded that to my Patreon, and I've also done the before and after of the edits, also in my Patreon. I've also shared my submissions spreadsheet with my $1 and up patrons. So anyone who contributes $1 a month or more gets to see where I've submitted, what the title was, what the outcome was, how long it took to get that outcome. And yeah, I'm really excited about sharing that information with my patrons, so I can't wait to see you there. I've also got a new Instagram, so if you're interested in keeping up with what I'm doing, less in the writing world, more in the real life world, give me a follow. I'd love to see what some of you are up to, so if you send me a message, I would love to follow you back and see what some of you guys do. I've included the link for that down below in the video description box, so give that a click if you like the sound of any of that. Okay, have a great week, and I'll see you next Sunday.